Q&A. And I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce these guys. I have Mr. John Russo, somewhere back here. Mr. wherever you want. Mr. Russell Streiner. George Kosana. And last but not least, Mr. Bill Hinzman, as we all know. And we have the cast of Night of the Living Dead. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right.
They're all dead. They're all messed up.
All right. Well, I'm not going to waste any time, so I'm going to let you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll ask some, and then we'll trade back and forth, and let's have some fun with this, guys. Ready? Ready. All right. Let's have some questions, guys.
Well, let's start with this first. Is there anyone in the room who has not seen the original Night of the Living Dead? All right, that means that 100% of the audience has seen Night of the Living Dead. Well, it's great to be here with you guys. This is my very, very first show in Florida, and it has been sensational. Spooky Empire is literally one of the best shows in the country that I've been involved with.
And of course, you people make it that way. Without the fans, as Russ often says, we'd be home pruning our gardens. So, thank you all for coming here.
And we're grateful to Spooky Empire for inviting us. And we're glad to be here.
Bill Hinzman can't talk because zombies don't.
Well, most of you who have been long-time zombie fans come to the show know that I've been here every year since it started. And, I enjoyed so much that there's no way they're going to keep me out. Pete knows that. So it's wonderful to be here, and like Jack said, we owe everything to you guys. You guys, the fans, made the film. And if you hadn't talked about it, made it an icon, made the film an icon and a classic, we wouldn't be here. And we all appreciate it. Marilyn does, George does, Kyra does. Wish they all could be here, but have to do with us. And Bonner.
For the first person who has a question, Bill Hinzman's going to give them a quarter later.
That's a deal.
They can pick on the zombie all they want, you know. But
I want to publicly thank Bill for showing me the ropes at the pool party last night. He closed it out. I only made it till about 2 o'clock, 2:30. But thanks, Bill. I had a good time.
Come on, guys, let's hear it. What do you got? All right, we have a gentleman up here. Oh, right there, since you're right next to him.
Hello? Hi, good evening, everybody. My main question, and I don't know if anybody else has that idea in mind, but when you gentlemen first decided to make Night of the Living Dead, would you think after all this time it would have such an impact in the horror industry? Meaning like the remakes and the 3D and all this. But when you guys were making it at the time, were you thinking that, you know, we're going to make history by making this movie?
Well, I was the only one that knew that it was going to be a classic that would go on for 40 years. My evidence for that is that I wore the white shirt so I'd have a place to photograph. I'll let Russ answer, give some of that.
George Romero, myself, had a company, a production company called The Late Image. And once we got started, Bill Hinzman joined us. Then, after military service, John Russo worked with us at the production company, and so did George Kosana. So we were kind of in Pittsburgh at that time. We're talking the early 60s. We started our business in 1961. We were kind of the production gypsies, the nouveau riche, or the nouveau guard of creativity in Pittsburgh. And frankly, we would do TV commercials that other more established production companies didn't want to touch. We, of course, at the time didn't know any better. But since the beginning of our production company, each job, each year, we would accumulate more equipment, sound equipment, camera equipment, lighting equipment, still photography equipment, which Bill Hinzman worked with us on. And so by the mid-60s, we had pretty much all of the equipment that we needed to make a movie. And that's what we always wanted to do. TV commercials were fine, industrial films, educational films, those were all fine. But our heart was we wanted to make a feature film, and we thought we could make a good one. So I'll let John Russo pick up the story because he and George Romero co-wrote Night of the Living Dead.
Let's see, well, would you repeat that question? I don't think we're answering the question quite yet.
Well, it was, did we think that it
Oh.
would be a classic?
Oh, okay. We were solidly behind George Romero as director, and we were a very tight-knit production group with everybody working wholeheartedly toward one goal, and that was to make the best horror film that we could. We wanted to pay off the people that paid their money and went to the theater and saw the same old tired stuff about, you know, giant grasshoppers and giant caterpillars, and the plot was always the same. The town drunk saw the creature and nobody believed him, and then the town drunk got killed, and the scientists started to figure something out, and the National Guard came in at the end with flamethrowers and wiped out the giant grasshopper or the giant weather. So we said we can do better than that, and one of the films that we kind of held up as an example was the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which totally knocked me out when I saw it. And I said, if we can make a film that has that kind of impact, we'll really have something. But almost every film I've ever been involved with, and I've done 19 of them, there's a lot of backstabbing and infighting and ego problems and all that. We didn't have that on Night of the Living Dead. We had a few little disagreements getting started, but those were pushed in the background, and everybody we worked our butts off to make that film what it is. And we did absolutely believe and know that we were making a good movie. We never lost that faith. But nobody could predict that it would become a 40-year classic and we'd still be talking about it with you people today. Nobody could make that prediction, but we did have total confidence in what we were doing.
And whenever we did commercial advertising, industrial films, etc., with Latent Image, we were overjoyed when every once in a while we'd even get paid.
Now, we all know how influential Night of the Living Dead was in the genre. Obviously, there's been millions and millions of zombie movies made since. Are there any movies, as you mentioned, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, aside from that one, that were influential in making Night of the Living Dead? Such as perhaps The Last
Well, I can
One?
tell you that, but the other part of his question we didn't answer is how we feel about the remakes and the sequels and the rip-offs and all that. Well, we don't enjoy when people steal our work and do things that are unauthorized, and that grinds our guts, so to speak, when that happens. But to have made something that has become an icon in our society, and to go to these shows and see people wearing things that we made or started, and people with tattoos of scenes from the film, and that's very gratifying. And it's also very gratifying to know that we've inspired other filmmakers. That we've helped and shown other people how to start their careers and build a career in this business. And since I started out as a teacher, I've really enjoyed that. And I don't want to monopolize all the conversation. Maybe Bill has something to say about that too.
Any more questions?
In other words, how do you feel about remakes and movies that are inspired by Night of the Living Dead?
What is a better honor than being popular?
It sure isn't getting ripped off, I can tell you that.
Yeah, the fact that we've inspired some of the great directors today were inspired by Night of the Living Dead to go and do horror films. Wes Craven, all those guys, when they talk about what got them started, one of the things that inspired them was Night of the Living Dead. They said, oh, a low-budget film was a success. We can do that too.
I think one of the things they want to know is what are some of our favorite films that other people have made? Do you have any favorites?
I haven't seen the new zombie movie yet, but I understand it's really funny. I want to go see that.
Zombie.
Yeah, she's done. I really liked Return of the Living Dead. I thought it was funny.
Now, John, you had a hand in that, didn't you?
But Jack was involved with that. And so was Russ.
Russ Streiner and Rudy Ritchie, who was a friend of ours and involved with Night of the Living Dead, three of us wrote a Return of the Living Dead script. It was straight horror. And we sold that script to Fox Films, and then it was sold to Orion and Hemdale Pictures. And it was one of those times where they said, horror films are dead, nobody wants horror, we better not make a horror film. So they hired Dan O'Bannon to rewrite and put the comedy into it. Well, at that point, it was out of our control. So, and I think Dan did a fabulous job. I really enjoyed the movie myself, and I did novelize his screenplay. So, the way it stands now, Russ and Rudy and I have credit for the original story of Return of the Living Dead, and then I have credit for the novel. And Dan was really a pleasure, a joy to work with. Very respectful guy with a lot of integrity.
I think one of my favorite horror films was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Of course, I'm dating myself. Okay. But initially we had hoped we would do enough box office business to make another. And when Living Dead took off on its own, we just got out of the road and let it go. But then everybody came out of the woodwork with their greed, and things happened.
My favorite horror films, as I mentioned, Escape of the Living Dead. That's our current project. Sorry, but Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I really loved Alien, and so again, Dan O'Bannon. But I thought that creature was just fabulous and was scary as hell. Way back, I liked Forbidden Planet, which is sci-fi in a way, but it did have monsters from the id. So the two films I would mention, along with Psycho, but mostly Forbidden Planet and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. I knew nothing about I Am Legend, which apparently George was influenced by that. It actually was my idea that the creatures would be dead people and that they would be after human flesh. I had been working on an idea where it started in a cemetery and the aliens came to Earth in search of human flesh, but we couldn't afford shooting the spaceship and all the other stuff, so we were kind of stuck. And when George came up with this story, part of the story, then he didn't know who the creatures were. So I suggested that they would be dead people. And I said, but what are they after? And he said, I don't know that. So I said, well, why don't we use my flesh-eating idea? So I think that's how they became flesh-eating ghouls. And when we did that, it kind of struck a chord with people, and all of a sudden, zombies, ghouls were more frightening than they ever had been before, when before all they did was kind of stagger around and throw somebody against the wall, and they weren't as frightening as werewolves or vampires. But, so we kind of gave it that twist, and it's been going on forever now.
All right, let's hear from this gentleman over here. I think you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, this is for Russ and George. The there was a favorite line in that movie, what would it be?
Gee, let me think. It wouldn't be, "They're coming to get you, Barbara." It wouldn't be that one. Now you have to understand that George Kosana and I have this kind of running feud. And maybe for next Spooky Empire, maybe we'll have a Night of the Living Dead line off. Because he believes that the sheriff's lines are far more popular than John. So we may just have to get a competition going here.
But you have to understand, Russ, he's not allowed to write with pencil. He has to use crayon. Okay? So when I said, "They're dead, they're all messed up," that's the line.
I only had one line, and it was.
I vote for the best sound effect, and it was Russ's head.
Now tell us about that scene. Obviously, that was the first interaction between a zombie and a human in the film. Was there any complications during that filming, or you want to tell us how you guys felt during that scene?
I had a little difficulty. I had a little difficulty
That's the one.
I had a little difficulty breaking the car window. Everybody remembers that. I whacked it one time, and I thought it was going to break, and it didn't. And I whacked it second and third time, and the rock flew out of my hand into the car, and of course it hit the camera. And I thought it hit George. I said, "Oh my God, I'm guilty."
George was lying on the front seat. You can tell from the camera angle. He was lying on the front seat of my mother's car. And then Bill decided to hit him with a rock.
But there's a whole story behind that scene. It's the last scene shot in the film. And I got a call from George, and he said, "You really look good as a zombie. Do you want to be the graveyard zombie?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll have to go to the house and find my suit. I left it at the house." So I did that, took my little son with me, and we walked into the house, and he's never forgotten that. I mean, he still can't live down walking into the house with all the body parts and everything. But anyway, we do the scene, and the first thing that was happening was it was cold and rainy.
It was very cold that day.
And very cold. So I went and put long on. If you look close, you can see the turtleneck. And rubbers on my shoes to keep my feet dry. And we were wrestling, and I'm beating up. We hadn't started it. And George said, "Now you got to kill Russell." After I fought with Judy, I said to George, "What am I supposed to do with Russell? Knock her down? You have to kill her." I said, "George, throughout all the filming, we've been told we have no strength except in unison." I said, "How am I supposed to kill him? I'm weak." And George thought about it for a while. Pardon the language. I said, "I'll fucking kill him." Then we started wrestling. And George says, you guys got to make some noise." I'm a zombie. I don't make noise. I'm not supposed to make noise. Russell has to make noise. So we start wrestling around, and I get a knee in the groin.
The zombie did make a noise.
George says, "That's better. Keep that up."
It was completely by accident, but
Yeah, you say that all the time.
but I mean, tussling with a zombie is no easy task. But I want to mention something that, and I have it captured on a still photograph at my table. I rush back to Barbara's to try to save Barbara from him. What's the first thing she does? She takes off and then leaves me. Hey, Barb, how about a hand here?
I have to remind everybody that when I'm chasing a car, I am moving pretty fast. So this slow thing, it changed everything. That whole concept of zombies becoming killers and flesh eaters was totally different than the Jamaican zombies walking around like this.
Now, Bill, backstage you were telling me a story about what influenced you in your walk.
Oh, I didn't know until I analyzed it, I guess, but people would ask me, where'd you get that walk? I said, I just learned to walk. And it occurred to me over the years, one of my favorite actors, Boris Karloff, was in a film, where he got electrocuted and brought back to life, or came back to life, and he dragged his leg. And that's where I got the leg drag from Boris.
From the Walking Dead.
Yeah, yeah.
The knee and the groin also probably affected the walk.
Yeah.
All right, we have any other questions? There's a gentleman over here that wanted to ask one.
I was wondering if the movie was well influenced by Written Matter. Oh, that, he asked it. Is this on? Yeah, okay. Okay, well, I had never read I Am Legend, and so apparently George was being influenced by that, but I didn't know it. And so I think that's why when I asked him, I said, well, you know, this story, he had written it up to the point where people get in the house. And when I asked him who these, what's wrong with this thing? When I asked him who these people were, he said he didn't know. I think that's because in Matheson, aren't they vampires? Well, I had no idea, so I just knew that he said he didn't know who the attackers were, and so I said, well, it seems like they're dead people. And then, what are they after? And he didn't know that either. And I think he was right at the point where if he'd have written any more, it would have become fairly obvious that, Matheson was behind this thing. So it was kind of good that I was ignorant of Matheson, because I was able then to kind of take the ball and run with it, and after everybody chipped in their ideas for the second half of the movie, I was able to go and write the second half of the script by myself. And then George and I went out to Rudy Ritchie's house. I mentioned Rudy before, and George read the script, and he said, there's something the matter with it. He said, here, Rudy, what do you think? And Rudy read it, and he said, oh, I don't, it's fine. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's good. George thought for a few minutes. He said, I know what it needs. It needs one more siege, meaning that he thought there should be a time where the zombies almost break into the house but don't succeed, and then there should be the final siege where they do get into the house. So the first ending that I wrote, the barber character survived. We had, Dwayne was shot, and then the sheriff and the deputy go into the house, and they work their way down to the basement. They're just about ready to shoot her, and it's kind of corny. They see a tear roll out of her eye, which tells them, oh, she's human, so they don't shoot her. In the last scene, she's sitting there huddled in that coat, and the bonfire's blazing in the background, and they're carrying out Ben's body. But then somebody, I don't know who, thought of, well, we should bring Johnny back. And we talked about that. Well, his head hit that tombstone. Are people going to buy that he could come back? Because if his head hit the tombstone, maybe the brain's destroyed, and he wouldn't come back. And we thought, well, maybe it didn't kill him, And we took that chance and brought him back, which turned out to be a very powerful moment. Maybe Russ would tell you, the makeup he did on himself was just fantastic. It knocked me out when I saw him. But I was seeing it in color too. But you want to tell how you came up with what you did there?
Well, the blow to the head was supposed to have done Johnny in, but we played with the story point a little bit, and one of the reasons that I made the decision up in the beginning of the film to make such a big deal out of putting the driving gloves on was because I knew when he came back at the end of the film, he was going to be surrounded by other zombies. It was night, it was confusion, the glasses were gone. And so I worked it out so I could put those driving gloves on. So the instant that the audience sees that black gloved hand coming up onto the white door frame, you know that that's Johnny, and you know Barbara had been saying, oh, we got to get to Johnny, we have to get to Johnny, and so forth. Well, now here's Johnny, but it's not exactly the way Barbara had in mind, though, I'm sure.
Oh, remember, it was kind of luck that we were shooting the last part of the cemetery scene last. So we could go back and do that with the driving gloves. You know, in other words, once we had that idea he would come back, we could fix it because we hadn't shot that part yet.
Yeah, but we ran into a climate change too, because it got very cold, and every time Russell breathed, you could see the vapors coming out of his mouth.
And we had to be, Bill also, I mean, we had to be very careful to camouflage that you couldn't see the vapor coming out of our breath. The beginning of the cemetery scene was the very first thing that we filmed, and as it turned out, the fight and all of that business was the very last thing that we filmed, because we didn't get finished in one day. And the span of time between summertime in Pittsburgh, just north of Pittsburgh, and when we actually did the fight in the cemetery, that was into October probably around this time of year, and the temperature had dropped, and in some cases you could see our breath.
Another little detail is that you notice the lightning. There's thunder and lightning. We were flashing color-tran movie lights in the actors' faces, Bill and Barbara, and, Russ. We didn't know if it was going to rain or not. So we thought, well, let's at least make thunder and lightning. So if when we film later it's raining, then at least we're covered. We established the storm. Well, as it turned out, it didn't rain, but it was cold. The leaves were off the trees, and we had those kinds of problems. Another piece of luck was that most of the trees at the cemetery were pine trees, so at least they still looked the same, winter or summer. So. Let me just say one more thing. Those kinds of details, like the establishing the driving gloves and all, came from, by the time we made this film, we had a wall covered with warts for our commercial and industrial work, and we were used to working out the fine details of every production we worked on. So we were then capable of making those kinds of judgments. So that experience really paid off when it came to making our first feature movie.
And another reason for the delays is every once in a while we had to suspend shooting because we had to make a commercial so we could pay the bills.
Yeah, the movie was shot, the first burst was 19 shooting days at the farmhouse, etc. And George did you live at the house with us? No. Yeah, the four of us slept at that house with no running water, no heat, nothing. Because we couldn't afford security to watch the cameras, and we used to have to carry garbage cans full of water from a well that was about 100 feet down this steep hill, and that's what we heated up to take sort of cat baths, have water to flush the commodes. And then we took this break, and then we went back for 8 or 9 days, and then we went to Washington, D.C., and then we shot the basement scenes in our studio in Pittsburgh. So those were the locations pretty much.
The basement that you see in the movie is not the real basement of the house, so don't be too disappointed in that. The basement of the house was simply too shallow. We couldn't film there. So we rigged the basement of our office building to look like the basement of the house.
And you can see huge industrial size air conditioning heating things in the ceiling if you want to look for them. So it's not really the basement of a house, it's the basement of a 5-story office building.
Gentleman over here. He's coming.
I just shot my first independent film last year, and I was inspired by Night of the Living Dead.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I had to write a paper in college about all the social issues and the camera shots, how they were set up. Can you tell me on the set when you're making the film, how much did that play into it, or you're just trying to scare people?
You mean how much was the cinematography plan?
Yeah, how well planned out?
Well,
Recording, planned out, shots.
George Romero did a great job with the cinematography. You know, George directed the film, but he also shot most of it. Russ and I shot a lot of the stuff that's on the television. We were shooting 16mm stuff for the TV and for the posse footage and so on. Russ shot the stuff in Washington, D.C. because George was a reporter. George was in that scene. But mostly, George directed it. One of the things that elevates this film above the usual low budget was we did a lot of planning stuff. We did a lot of timing shots, follow focus. We had, you know, maybe a shot starts wide, somebody else enters, the camera pans over some other piece of business, and it's all worked out in time. And most low-budget films just cut to this, cut to that, cut to this, cut to, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But so the film looks, it's shot much better than most low-budget films were at that time, and that's thanks to George. George was also a very, very good editor. So, you know, and as I said, the reason we were solidly behind George is because we knew what his talents were at that point, you know. We had worked together for quite a few years on every kind of film project, and so George had to be the director of cinematography.
We used to go into the editing room and tell him, go home, you've been here 20 hours. He'd say, yeah, I'll get this one more scene, I'll get this one more scene. And then he wouldn't leave. He'd do 20 more.
He used to have, and we didn't have a moviola. You'd go in the editing room, whether he was editing, or Russ, or me, or Bill, and the film would be in our mouths and be hanging all over the damn place. It looked like spaghetti, you know. We didn't. Everything was done with a movie scope and a 6 or 8 gang synchronizer. Today, you do all that stuff on a computer. It's like a whiz, you know. It's so damn easy compared to how we had it.
I think one of the things that made the film what it is that George had a style of shooting which was very close to cinema verite. If you know what cinema verite is, it's a lot of handheld cameras, low angles, and then he knew how to cut that stuff together. And in my estimation, he was at the time one of the finest editors in the country. He could take film and turn it into something with nothing but a bunch of shots. He'd make it into something. He did some editing for me. It's fantastic. And that included music. And you have to remember in those days, we had synchronizers that were 8 bags of synchronizers where the 16mm film and mag track would go through that. And George would have to go
crank it by hand, and he could crank it by hand and make the motion run pretty true.
Yeah, he'd run it inside 24 frames.
But when he's talking about a 6 or 8 gang synchronizer, you would be editing a picture in one gang, and then all the different soundtracks, and, you know, maybe 2 or 3 voice tracks, sound effects tracks, music tracks. You wouldn't see that stuff put together until you started mixing. And you had to make a log, and your mind had to be right about that stuff. Because when you went there and were paying $300 an hour to mix, you better have made the right calls. Now, when you do it on a computer, you see it all the way. You know, you see your film mixed as you're editing. And you find out if it's working or not. But here's what I'm scared of. Maybe somebody knows the answer. We're sitting in these electric chairs here, and I imagine if we don't entertain you sufficiently that somebody's going to pull a switch. And then the moderator over there you go. The moderator, he's not going to get zapped. The rest of us will be zapped. I don't think it's fair. If he does a bad job, he should get zapped too.
I wasn't in the film.
One of the things that's, the process that you just heard, the old style of actually working with film, has changed pretty dramatically to today's digital technology and digital production. But the one thing that has remained the same, and this is for any independent filmmaker or anybody who feels that they might want to take their shot at making a film, it all starts with a story. If you have a solid story, stick to your guns. Digital technology is now much, much, much easier. In a certain sense, the way Night of the Living Dead was done, and all movies at that time were done, was quite primitive to the technological advances that have been made now. So if you have any inclination toward being an independent filmmaker, please follow them. Use the tools that are available to you, but start with a solid story.
Question up here.
Bill, you've been in you've had a number of other little roles as a zombie, like your wonderful film Flesh Eater, which was great. I'm sure all of you have had independent filmmakers and other filmmakers come up to you and say, would you mind having a little cameo in my movie? Can you talk to that and mention any of the cameos you have held or some of the odd offers that have been made to you?
It's very exciting for someone to go up and ask you either to direct their film or to shoot their film. I've been DPs on films, pretty big films, and a lot of other films other than zombie films. But my daughter is an assistant director in LA, and she once in a while hires actors. I told her, Heidi, when are you going to give me a call and give me an acting job? Dad, I can't act. Pretty well taken from there. But I just was in an independent film called River of Darkness. I was an actor. That's all I did was act. Which was kind of neat. You didn't have to do anything else but act. I sat around waiting for me to play. And took time to learn my lines. I worked with Kurt Angle and Kevin Nash, Sid Vicious, and those guys are, anyway, I was a bad guy. They killed me. And that was a lot of fun. It was a hell of a movie. I can't wait to see it.
You have to be careful when you're approached by them. Because one fella came up to my table and says, I want you to be in my film. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, what are we doing? He says, well, I got this story from low budget. I said, what's your budget? He says, $1,000. I said, I want to buy a picture. So you have to be very careful what you get involved in, because it may end up costing you more than you're willing to pay in both emotions, finance, and your health.
I thought he also asked you to cough up $10,000.
Oh, that was a different guy came up to me and he says, I want you to be in my movie. Here's the script. If you like it, give me a call after you read it. So I did. And I said, it's not a bad script that has a sound premise, needs refinement, but I'm interested. He said, you want to put $10,000 into it so I can shoot it? I said, goodbye. But I was in Woody Harrelson's Kingpin. I made 7 pictures altogether. And you have to be careful because you can't lose sight of the fact that this is a business. It may be a glamorous business, it may be a horror business, but it's a business. If you don't approach it in a business-like manner, you're committing suicide in any number of ways. And as Ray Lane, a friend of ours, used to say, don't sell so much of your soul at sunup that you can't buy it back by sundown.
Any questions? Well, I know, John, you mentioned earlier that everyone involved in the film was playing multiple roles. Obviously, you were involved in the writing. but you were also involved in acting in the film. Now, I read something along the lines of you did something no one else wanted to do in the film. You want to tell us about that?
Well, I probably did a lot of things no one wanted to do. Then I couldn't do some of the things I did want to do. Oh well. Well, I was the zombie that got the tire iron in the head, and that happened because it was 4 o'clock in the morning and everybody had gone home. And I said, oh well, I'll do that. So, and I was the general's driver. A lot of people might not know that, in my old Army uniform. And in Washington, D.C., I was the driver. And then one night, we were getting ready to shoot the scene with Molotov cocktails. And I said, George, we made the point that these things go up pretty easy. Just, burn them, they go up pretty easy. And we're going to throw all these Molotov cocktails. And if none of the zombies catch on fire, then we're going to look pretty stupid. So he said, well, we don't have a stuntman, we don't have an asbestos suit, we don't. I said, oh hell, I'll do it. So all I did was put tight-fitting Levi pants and jacket on and a loose brown suit over that, and so I could get out of it quickly, hopefully. And then the camera was behind me, and we made a puddle of gasoline on the ground, and Carl Hardling ran gasoline up my leg to my back, and then we had Bill over the hill with blankets. A couple people with blankets. I had to stagger and fall over this hill, where hopefully the people with the blankets could smother the flames. So everybody had these looks of glee on their face, like we ended up getting 3 takes, and I just would walk like a zombie until I felt my hair being singed, and then I'd fall over the hill and they'd put out the flames. So, and it worked. But Vince Cervinsky told me later, he said, on a hot day like this, he said, it's not so much the gasoline, but the fumes tend to collect around you, and if the fumes would have got set on fire, then you would have been just a ball of fire. I said, thanks for telling me now after it's over.
After I saw Jack do after I saw you do your little number, somebody said, well, when Dwayne is sticking toward John, scaring the zombies away, you ought to have to touch the zombie and catch him on fire. I'll do it. I used lighter fluid, and I just poured it over the front of the suit. And he touched it and went up, and I just backed away, which I shouldn't have done. I was a zombie. I was supposed to back away.
What Jack Russo didn't tell you was that we had a meeting. We said, well, of all the people we know, who can we get to set on fire? And we decided one way or another we would get Russo to do it. And then Bill, he's got one scene where he's trying to tamp out flames on him. But this is a real story that most people never know about. Bill Hinzman was actually the hero of the movie in terms of safety. My brother Gary, who was doing mostly behind-the-scenes work on Night of the Living Dead, he appears in some of the still photographs at the tail end of the film when the bonfire gets started. But the overstuffed chair in the living room that Dwayne, this is during the escape sequence, that Dwayne pushed, no, it wasn't during the escape sequence. He pushes out this overstuffed chair, and between takes, he sets it on fire with his torch. And between takes, we would put the fire out, reset the camera and so forth, relight the chair, and get the next action. What we didn't know was that there was a metal frame inside the chair that each time we lit it was getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And my brother Gary's job was to relight the chair so we would have continuity, fire from angle to angle and angle. One time he tried to relight the chair, and the trail of gasoline and lighter fluid ran up. It hit the hot frame in the chair, ran up the flame and up to his arm, and fortunately, Bill Hinzman, who on that particular shooting day wasn't being a zombie, he was on the camera crew that day, was able to tackle Gary and put him out. Otherwise, that could have been a very bad accident. We had no bad accidents, but that came close. Bill Hinzman put him out, and fortunately he was okay. No real burns.
As the production manager also, I was extremely proud of the fact that on that film, we only had one accident. That was it. But what amuses me, and nobody knows about, we were going to blow the truck up. And somehow the people of Evans City got to work. And we intended to do this like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning so as not to disturb things too badly. We had the truck set up on the road, and about 100 yards worth of lawn chairs were strung out down the road with the people of Evans City sitting in and waiting for us to blow the truck up. So we had to back them up to get them out of the way. And when it finally went, they were all applauding and they went home.
You know, the whole incident with Gary and I were pretty close. Gary was still in high school. He used to come down to our old shop, and I'd take him on still photograph jobs. We had to change film equipment just in the winter time. But I got to look pretty close with Gary, so I don't know if I would have risked myself with these guys, but Gary was pretty close, so I went after him to shut him down.
All right, gentlemen, we're running out of time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. But if we have any last quick questions, one quick question, nobody? One, gentleman over here, real quick, and then we'll part ways.
Okay, I recently saw a theatrical version of Night of the Living Dead that was played partly for laughs, but still maintained very much the creepy spirit of the original. I was wondering if anybody on the panel had been involved in any way or even knew that this production was going on.
You mean a stage play?
Yeah, stage production at the Hippodrome Theater in Gainesville.
It all started with a young lady up in Edinburgh, PA, college Edinburgh, and she put on a play, and she invited George, invited all of us to come up and see the play. And I went up and was very impressed, and I decided to put it on, only staged differently, and I did that. I lost my shirt, but I had my daughter play Barbara, and it was a good little play. And now there's, people are putting out little pieces of junk going in the play now. But, I don't think I'd do it again. Like I said, I lost my shirt.
I had one person come up to my table and ask me if I ever saw the bunnies. And I, what are you talking about? He said, there is a short of some kind that has rabbits playing our parts. And every line I spoke in the film is coming out of the mouth of one of the rabbits. No, I never heard it, never saw it. But people are parroting it and ripping it off right now.
No, my daughter found it on the internet. I saw part of it.
All right, gentlemen. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. And thank you. I think it's a pleasure to have you guys up here. The legendary Night of the Living Dead. Bill, George, Russell, John, it was a pleasure. Thanks, guys.